Okay, my name's Dan of the Anti-Fragile Movement, and I help older skaters and runners move better, feel better, so they can keep rolling and keep running. Something I've been dealing with for 15, 20 years is really tight hips. I have a background of gymnastics and martial arts, and I used to be really mobile and really supple, but then 20 years of skating, plus work, sitting, all these sort of things has now led to my hips getting really stiff and tight, and that led to lower back issues, a couple of knee niggles, and I'd done loads of stretching, loads of mobility, and nothing really seemed to stick. But isometrics are a great place to start because they're really simple to do. You don't need any equipment, you can do them pretty much anywhere, and you can do them consistently. And the whole point of these isometrics is to hit every part of the hip, the front of the hip, the side, the back, and the inside. This whole program I'm going to give you now is designed to be done over 4 weeks, and each week you change the protocol slightly, but the movements stay the same, which I'll run through anyway. So I'm going to go through these 4 movements, and the reason that isometrics are so useful is, like I said, they're simple, they're very accessible, you're in control of how much effort you put in, but the idea is through holding these positions for a certain amount of time, you really start to understand the area that you're trying to work on. So if you've got a weak lateral or side of your hip, these movements will really show how weak they are. So if you can barely manage 10 seconds, that's a good thing. You found something you need to work on more. It's also about creating space around the hip joint to allow you to get into different positions and movements. Particularly the kickstand hinge movement that we're going to look at is to open up the biggest, strongest part of your body, which is the glute max, the biggest muscle here. If that gets tight, it basically closes off that whole area, which doesn't give your hip a lot of space to move into. So if we can kind of clean that up, that just gives your hip so much more space to move in and out of these different positions. So we're going to go through each movement one at a time. I'm going to give you the protocol of how long to do it for each week, because the idea is we progress week to week. If you can't hold any of them for the set amount of time in that first week, just reduce it to start with. We're starting off with 30-second holds, but if you can only manage 20 before you start cramping, stick with 20. Okay, but if you haven't done anything like this for a long time or ever, then you're going to get these sensations. So we're going to look at front of the hip first, these hip flexor muscles. These are the muscles that bring your leg up and down. Think if you ollie when you're skating and you pull that leg up, our ollies start to feel like they're getting really low and just a bit shit as we get older, because the strength of these muscles and the ability to pull that leg up starts to diminish. So we want to be able to maintain that. For runners, obviously when you're running, you're constantly pulling that leg up and down. And through the other movements we're going to do, if you can't get full hip extension, then into full hip flexion, then the rest of your body is going to start to compensate. That might be through the lower back, it might be more impact through the knee and the ankle, but strong hip flexors are really, really useful and important. Very, very simple to do. You just lay flat on your back. I'm going to take my right leg, raise it up. I'm going to take my right hand, press against my knee. I'm going to push into my hand, but this only wants to be at about 50 to 60% intensity. You're not pushing as hard as you can. You're not trying to drive your lower back into the floor. You should be feeling the front of your hip there. Upper body should be fairly relaxed. So I'm just going to drive my knee into my hand at about 50% intensity. Then I'm going to resist it with my hand. And you're going to hold this for 30 seconds on this leg. Upper body fairly relaxed and breathing as normal. And I'm feeling that in the front of my hip. You want pretty much a 90-degree angle there. So you'll do 30 seconds on one, and then directly in to 30 seconds on the other. Okay, so 30 seconds right leg, 30 seconds left leg, and you will repeat that 3 times. So you'll end up doing 3 sets of 30 seconds on the right, 3 seconds of 30 seconds on the left. But what we're looking for here is to feel the muscles in the front of the hip. You might feel it down into the quad, absolutely fine, that's normal. Keep the toe pulled up, keep this at 90 degrees. Okay, lower back stays normal. I'm not trying to push it into the floor or overarch. I just want the front of that hip to be doing all of the work. So that's number one. That's for the front of the hips, the hip flexors. The second one, this is now the opposite side, the back of the hip. This one will take a little bit of practice. This is based on something called the Founder, which is from a company called Foundation Training, which I've done a bit of. It's really useful. They do a two-footed variation, but we're going to focus on a single-footed variation so we really feel that each individual glute there. So to start off with this one, the setup is important. You're going to stand on one leg, so you're going to get all of that weight over that foot. Just bend the knee, so that shin tilts forwards. That knee, this angle, and this foot stays exactly like this throughout the whole movement. So here now, I should feel most of the weight on the middle of my foot. It might feel, my heel is just like I could get a credit card under it. That's absolutely fine. What you don't want is to be rocked back too much onto the heel. So I'm in the middle of the foot. I'm going to take my back foot then and just place my tiptoe on the floor purely for balance. There's no weight on my back foot. All the weight is on my front foot. Then I'm going to send my hips backwards without my knee moving. So as my hips go back, I don't want my knee to follow. As my hips go back, my knee in shin angle stays exactly the same. Once I start to feel a bit of a stretch here, I'm going to take my hands, place the fingertips together to create this kind of pressing position, and then I'm going to reach my hands forwards whilst pressing my fingers together, and I'm trying to get my butt that way and my hands that way. So I'm trying to go in opposite directions. And when you get this right, you should feel a really deep stretch on the back of the hip there. This might take a bit of practice, so don't worry if you don't get it immediately. So I'm sending my hips back while I'm sending my hands forwards. So I'm trying to make my spine as long as possible. But all of the weight is on that front leg. Back foot is just there for balance. And when I breathe, I'm trying to breathe in to my upper back. Then as I exhale, I'm trying to stretch further. Breathe into the upper back. As I breathe out, stretch further. So I'm constantly trying to send my fingers that way, my hands that way, and my butt that way. And if you get it right, you'll know when you get it right, because you might even start to get this shaking sensation, and it feels like it's literally tearing your glute in half, and that's a good thing. That's what we want. Same principle as the previous one. 30 seconds on that side, into 30 seconds on that side. But this is not passive. You're constantly trying to drive hands in that direction or fingers in that direction with a little bit of pressure touching each other, and butt in the other direction with no weight on that foot. It's just there as a kickstand, like a stabilizer. When you come back up, you're going to really feel that glute. 30 seconds on the right, 30 seconds on the left, 3 times. So that's 3 minutes in total. So those first 2 minutes are for front of the hip and for back of the hip. The next 2 movements are for the outside of the hip and the inside of the hip. So for this first one, for the outside of the hip, you're just going to put a cushion under your head, whatever's comfortable. Legs pretty straight. So this is for the top hip, for this outside hip here. So what I'm going to do initially is I'm going to try and push my top leg away from my bottom leg. And what you should find is a little gap appears underneath your ribs. Okay, so I'm trying to take that foot, if you can see, that's straight on top, that's pushed away. A little gap appears here, and that should stay. I'm then going to lift my leg and pull it slightly behind me, but I'm constantly trying to take this leg, the top leg, further away than the bottom leg. So I'm reaching with the top leg. This isn't about how high can you get your leg. This is about how far away can you get your leg whilst pulling it behind and up. So we're trying to feel this on the outside of the hip. You may very well get a cramping sensation with this, and that's totally normal. That's what we're looking for. So don't think about how high can I lift. Think about how far away can I get my foot whilst pulling it up and back. And there, for me, That's really crampy. But I'm maintaining that pressure of constantly trying to push the leg away from me. So we're going to try and target the outside of the hip there. The outside of the hip, very important. These days, we don't do, other than when you're skating. If you're skating, you're in this position here and you're kind of moving that way, but your body is focusing that way. So apart from when you actually ollie and slide that leg up, when that is all a bit of the outside of the hip there to help pull that leg up, we don't do a lot of lateral sideways movements. And what you tend to happen if you have a weak outside of the hips, you tend to see things like feet turned out to the side or knees slightly caving in because your body's trying to compensate for the strength that it doesn't have there. So that doesn't fix everything, but strong lateral hip or glute med as it's known, which is a muscle, the second biggest glute muscle on the side here, is a leg that helps us with this kind of rotation of the movement of the hip. So building strength in them as well as the back and the front, super, super important. So that's for the outside. Exactly the same principle, 30 seconds on one leg, 30 seconds on the other leg, 3 rounds, 3 minutes in total. So far, we've got 3 sets of 3 minutes. 3 minutes for the front of the hip, 3 minutes for the back of the hip, 3 minutes for either side of the hip. Last one then, for the inside of the hip, the adductors, which are the ones in here, that's the muscle that pulls your leg towards you. If anyone's skating has slammed and kind of done the splits, you know what that adductor feels like. But this movement of pulling inwards, it helps with kind of with the groin, with that muscle on the inside of the hip. What I struggle with most, and this is where I've discovered my weaknesses, if I was to do a squat, for example, I dislocated my right ankle skating in the late 90s. So if I do a squat, if you watch my right foot, notice it turns out like that. Through years and years of just avoiding loading that right leg and putting all my weight on my left leg, my adductors in here have got very weak, and that adductor is one of the muscles that helps pull that knee inwards when you're doing things like squats to be able to drive out of it. So I've got a real weakness on that right adductor, which I've discovered through doing a lot of these movements. So this is specifically for that. So laying on your side again, but this time your front leg goes in front of you. Same thing, same principle as that last one. I'm trying to drive my bottom leg away from me. So I'm trying to stretch my bottom leg away, and then I'm trying to lift it up. And I'm trying to reach it as far away as I can. I'm trying to get my heel to the opposite wall whilst I'm trying to lift high. And I can immediately feel that adductor muscle in there having to engage to pull that leg up. But again, upper body wants to be pretty relaxed and be able to breathe comfortably. If your upper body's stiff and tight like that, that will kind of prevent you getting all the movement through the lower body. Again, 30-second hold. Trying to drive, it's not passive, you're constantly working, trying to get the heel away from you whilst lifting the leg. 30 seconds on the right, straight into 30 seconds on the left. So those are our 4 movements. 30 seconds on each leg, 3 rounds, so 3 minutes each. So that whole sequence takes you 12 minutes. If you can do this every day, great. If you need to do 2 days on, 1 day off, absolutely fine. The way to progress this is in the first week, do exactly that, so that's 12 minutes. On the second week, you'll do 4 rounds of 30 seconds. On the third week, you will do 3 rounds of 45 seconds. Then on the fourth week, you will do 3 rounds of 1 minute. So you're progressively increasing the time scale week to week. But like I said at the start, if 30 seconds feels too much at the start, do 20. And then you can build up to 30 seconds on the next week, 40 seconds on the next week, etc. But initially, don't worry about the time scale too much. The idea is, what can you feel? Can you feel the front of your hip working on that first movement? Can you feel the stretch on the back of the hip? Can you feel the outside of the hip working hard? Can you feel those muscles on the inside? Because feeling those muscles work first is so much more important than just going through the motions of an exercise just to tick a box. Getting that cramping sensation is absolutely fine. It's not very pleasant, but it's fine. That just shows that you're working hard enough. But do this for this 4 weeks consistently. Don't do it for a week, feel better, then stop. Run through the whole 4 weeks, because most people fall down because they just don't follow the program to the end. They feel a bit better, so they stop doing it. If you want to build strong, resilient hips to be able to skate and run and jump and throw and ollie and kickflip and all these sort of things, all these movements come through the hips. The hips are so important, and as we get older, we lose so much movement through the hips. That's where everything starts to feel hard. We start to feel heavy, we start to feel slow, less bouncy, and anything athletic feels just genuinely more shit. So building strength in those 4 areas of the hip is the kind of base level of what you need to understand and what you need to build the strength on before we kind of load anything onto that, because everything after that just feels a lot easier to do. Once you've got that base strength in those different parts of the hip, the mobility starts to feel better, the strength stuff starts to feel better, squats, lunges, all these things just feel better. Consistency wins every single time. Give it a go. I'd love to know how you find it. Tag me in it if you put it on Instagram. Share it with people. This free 12 minutes thing could be something that a lot of people like me with really shit stiff hips need, just to get that head start and that foot in the door to help improving everything else again. So give it a go and let me know how you find it.